second in our new alumni professional development series that we're calling Kean Connect. We looked at our alumni programs and wanted to be able to bring you all more events and programs that would help you develop yourselves professionally. That's what we're doing with these seminars and webinars and workshops, is hopefully bringing you topics that will help you grow and expand. So always feel free to suggest ideas to us if there's things or areas that you'd like to learn from. Our next event in Kean Connect is going to be a webinar on April 27th about the presidential election with a political science professor, Kean. So he'll be speaking about what's going on and how our current candidates might be changing or expanding the political climate. Are we moving away from the two-party system? Is this changing American politics in any way? That's going to be a lunchtime webinar from 12 to 12:30 that you can tune in if you'd like to participate. Tonight's event is being streamed live on Kean Live, and it's going to be saved so that alumni can reference it in the future. So our hope is to build a bank of these videos, so if you call our office in a year or two and you need help with resumes or interviewing or want to learn more about political science, all of these videos will be on the website, but you can go and reference them in the future, so we're building out this library of resources. It also helps to be accessible, whether you're here in Union and you're able to fight the Morris Avenue traffic to join us, or if you're in Toms River or Winzhou, China, or Phoenix, Arizona. We want to make sure that we're creating programming that engages our alumni no matter where you are. So even if you move away, keep us in mind and we'll keep doing these programs for you. Kean Connect is a subcommittee of our Alumni Leadership Initiative, ALI, and ALI is a committee of the Alumni Association overall. We have 89,000 alumni around the world, and the Alumni Association includes all of them and represents them and does programming to get people engaged and back together. ALI is one of those committees, and we have our co-chair, Susanna Tavera, here this evening, who's going to be moderating. I'm pleased to introduce her to you all. She graduated in 2003 and has been engaged in a number of different ways throughout the years. So she'll hopefully tell you a little bit more about yourself, but we've been so pleased to work with her and to have her now chairing ALI and working with us more closely. I'm going to turn it over to Susanna, and again, we're so glad that you guys are here. We'll take questions later on in the panel, which I'm sure she'll talk about. You can also tweet at us. We're at Kean Alumni, and use hashtag Kean Connect. So if there's a burning question you don't want to have to remember, go ahead and send it out, and we'll have it to you to ask our panelists.
Great. Thanks, Stella.
You're welcome.
I am Susanna Tavera. Like Stella said, I did graduate in 2003 with a bachelor's in marketing. I worked in the corporate world for several years, went back to school, and actually got my master's in architecture from NJIT. So I'm now an architect, but I always come back to Kean and try to give back and support. So on behalf of ALI, I welcome you all. Especially like to welcome all our mentors and mentees that we have here from the ALI mentoring program. I'm so happy you guys could join us. Tonight is only the second of what we hope will be part of an annual schedule of seminars designed to engage our alumni and students by responding specifically to your needs and interests. Tonight's presentation focuses on the interview process and is not only for recent alums, but also for those of us that are attempting a career move or advancement in our careers. The focus is very simple: practical advice about how you make yourself marketable to prospective employers and how to maneuver successfully through the interview process. The interview is a step that no matter what career or field you have chosen, you eventually have to do and do so successfully. So, how do you make yourself stand out from other candidates that have the same degree or achievements as you? We hope to answer these questions and some many more tonight. I'm especially happy to welcome our panelists. Lisa Colicchio, class of 1990, is an executive vice president for global human resources at Wyndham Worldwide. Michelle Napoli, class of 2002 and 2005 with a master's, is the manager of human resources for the Carnegie Corporation of New York. And right on time, Sharyar Chaudhry, class of 2008, is the lead technical talent acquisition for human resources at Morgan Stanley. So we'll begin by following a talk show format, only to keep it somewhat structured, but please feel free to elaborate with any stories or tips as you wish. I will pose a series of questions to our panelists before opening up the event to the audience, so you can ask whatever questions are on your mind. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay. Someone has their first interview scheduled and does not know much about the company. What steps can one take to prepare for the interview? Michelle?
Sure. So we'll start with congratulations. You've made it to the interview phase of the program. And what that means is basically your resume and application have made it to the top of the pile, and you've spark the interest of the recruiter and the company. So how do you prepare? What are the next steps, and what do you want to do to keep them engaged and keep them interested in you as a candidate? And what it boils down to is preparation, how you prepare, how you arrive, and how you make your first impression at the interview and with the interviewer go a long way. So I really want to focus in on how you prepare. And the one thing that really resonates in how you prepare is research, research, research. You'll hear me say this a lot during our talk tonight, but I think I can't emphasize enough how important it is that you really do your homework and learn about the company you're interviewing with. And when I say learn and research, it doesn't mean spending an hour on their website a day or two before the interview, but really take a deep dive into their website, read about them. Are they in the paper? Are they in the news? What others are saying about them? Are they a publicly traded company? What's their stock looking like? All of this information will really go a long way in the interview to help you be informed and to generate some questions you may want to clarify and ask during the interview. So you really want to do your homework about the company, all aspects of the company. You also want to look into what the job is aside from the job description. Many organizations' websites have organizational information, their org charts, where you could probably poke around and see where the job falls within the organization. So you want to take it upon yourself to learn who the job reports to if possible, what the team members are like, what the organizational structure is like, and then kind of reflect back as to what your qualifications and experiences are and how they would relate to the job as being part of your preparation for the job. And as you think through that, you also want to think and anticipate some of the questions you may be asked during that interview and really be thoughtful, write them down. I would even advise you to role play. I hear that some of you are here with your mentor, so great opportunity to bounce ideas off of your mentor and have them kind of provide the feedback as to how you present in an interview. Do you have the interview? Look, it's a nerve-wracking experience, so you want to be aware of any nonverbal cues. If you get nervous, do you twirl your hair or do you check your watch? All these things that may distract or take away from your presence at the interview. So you want to be prepared. You want to know what you're going to say. Also, as it relates to preparedness for the interview, how you plan. Know what you're going to wear. Take that stress off the table. Iron your shirt. Get your suit dry clean. One last thing you have to think about. Have your interview kit prepared. So what you're going to take to the interview. Extra resumes, business cards if applicable, pen and paper to take notes. All of that goes into preparing for the interview. In addition to doing your homework and researching about the job and the company, it's all inclusive as to how you prepare and ultimately present at the interview. That will determine your success during the interview and hopefully thereafter. Better?
I just wanted to piggyback on what she said, and absolutely very valid points for everybody that is looking for jobs for the first time and out in the market. When you walk in, those tangible preparedness is very, very important, no doubt, but there's an intangible factor, which is your mindset, which won't show on paper, which won't show on your resume. It won't even show when you walk in on your dress up. It's not going to show up. It's going to show in your attitude. So always have that winning attitude in your face. You walk in as if you have the job, not begging for the job. Walk in and pretend, and your homework should prepare you enough where you already are acting as if you have the job, right? You should, and you shouldn't go in not knowing what is expected of you at the job. So always have that winning mindset. It's very, very important. We often see that people walk in confused, and a lot of people come off more entitled, that they don't really aren't sure whether they're going to get the job, or if they don't get it, it's whatever. Don't have that attitude. Very, very important. So that's one of the intangible factors.
Great. There are many different types of interviews today. Can you explain the difference between in-person interviews versus a Skype or phone interview versus a panel interview, and are there different ways to prepare for them? Would you like to?
Sure. So an interview is usually a person-to-person interaction or person or people-to-people interaction, and they take a lot of different shapes and forms, especially today with the advent of technology and video. A lot of times when people think about the classic interview, it's one person sitting across the desk from another person, and that probably is still the most common types of interviews today. But let me just step back. So you usually will tend to have what's called a phone screen or a phone interview. And that's usually a recruiter or a hiring manager kind of doing a first pass run through your resume. Do you have the basic qualifications that they are looking for in order to progress you to the next level of interviews, which becomes those person-to-person. Person-to-person interviews, again, sometimes take place in person. A lot of times they're now taking place over video, over Skype. A lot of companies are using technology, for example, called Higher View. Very common. Montage is another one. And this actually is quite helpful because, number one, it saves on your time as a candidate. So think about a candidate perhaps in Singapore who's interviewing for a position in New York City, perhaps working for Schott, Morgan Stanley. And so does it make sense to fly a candidate, have that person spend 18 hours on a plane just for a first round interview when that person may or may not be a fit, or he or she may not have the interest in the role? So a lot of times video interviews are kind of those first level interviews where you meet the hiring manager, and it's really a chance for you to get to know each other before the more formal, the in-person interviews. So it's actually a really great thing if you get a video interview. I get asked that a lot. Does that mean anything? A lot of times these days it's really around convenience. It's also around cost. It's very expensive, especially for global companies to fly people all over the world. And then there's the in-person interviews. And these interviews tend to take a couple of shapes and forms. You usually see the cartoon characters of the person with the clipboard sitting behind the desk and the person on the other side. That's fairly common. But you also have what's called panel interviews, and Suzanne mentioned this. Panel interviews are perhaps where there's maybe multiple interviewers interviewing a candidate. I wouldn't read too much into whether or not you have a panel interview or an individual interview being an advantage or not. It's a lot of times it's the style of the company. I grew up in pharmaceuticals, for example, and particularly when you're hiring for scientific positions or engineering or technology positions, you will have panels because all of the scientists want to hear all of the answers to the candidates' questions. So they'll sometimes have 3 or 4 interviewers sitting at a table like this. You'll be sitting there, and they're each asking questions, but everybody's hearing the answers at the same time. That's also really helpful for you, and I think sometimes candidates miss this nuance. Watch how the interviewers interact with each other, because that can also give you insight into what the culture is like. The interview panel may be the department you'll be working with. It may be a cross-section of people. You may work with a customer, a peer, an internal customer, one of your future direct reports. So panel interviews shouldn't be intimidating. I know sometimes it feels stressful. You walk in, you see this table, there's 4 people sitting at it, and it's you, and there's a spotlight, like that spotlight's beaming on us right now. It's a good thing. So use it as a two-way. But again, I wouldn't read too much into whether a company does panel interviews versus individual interviews. They're all important. And as Michelle and Ashav told you, it's important, just as important to prep for an interview, whether it's a video interview or it's an in-person interview. And that old thing that you see the cartoons about, people kind of their business from up and they have their bunny slippers on. You want to take a chance with that, that's fine, but I always recommend if you're doing a video interview, act and dress exactly like you would as you're going into the office. I'm sure you've seen just some interesting choices of dress. I think sometimes people tend to think, oh, well, it's a video interview and my cats are jumping around behind me and, you see my poster of Cristiano Ronaldo in the back. You just probably want to err a little bit more on the side of conservative because, again, the interviewers I usually don't know you. So you always want to prep and put your best foot forward. Treat it exactly like you would as if you were going into the office.
Oh yeah, I think I'm becoming the piggyback expert here. But yeah, just to add on to what she said, it's the video and the in-person obviously make a more face-to-face impression. a lot of people where people don't do as good or don't represent themselves as much as they want to are phone interviews. That's where you can get misconstrued the most. Because people don't know your body gesture, your body language, the way if you're sitting or if you're talking while you're talking, if you're walking while you're talking, or if you're in an upright, straight position in a more confident position, comes off on your voice. The way you project your your answers, right? A lot of people tend to think that, hey, just because the interviewer isn't looking, it can't see me, I could probably lay down or sit back and slouch or whichever. That body language that you're projecting is actually coming through. It's going through to the other side. A good interviewer, an expert interviewer will right away know whether you're sitting, standing, laying down, or not even paying much attention. So definitely make sure you're in your most confident stature. Make sure you are in a quiet place where there's no background noise. Very, very important. I mean, if that job means something to you, then yeah, you should present your best foot forward. And if it doesn't, then I don't think you should even be there, right? So yeah, definitely make yourself presentable in every which way, phone, in person, or Skype.
Very interesting. How does one adjust their approach for the interview based on the nonprofit field? Michelle?
Sure. So I'm at a table with corporate executives beside me. So I come from the philanthropic field and nonprofit. So I'll give you some perspective how it's different than corporate and what you may want to keep in mind if that's something you're interested in, if you should find yourself in an interview for a nonprofit organization. And the one most important thing is the mission of the corporation. As a general rule of thumb, nonprofit organizations are very mission driven. The people who work there are very passionate about the cause, and they're doing work that they love. So when you arrive at an interview for a nonprofit organization, you have to show how that mission resonates with you. Tell stories. What have you done for volunteer work? Are you an altruistic person? What really resonates with you in the nonprofit field? You also want to be mindful that you should be flexible. So many organizations, nonprofit organizations, employ a very lean staffing model, or where one person wears many hats. So understand that the HR person may also be the facilities manager or the office manager. So if they can't get you in for an interview in a timely fashion, or if you don't hear from them within a couple of weeks, of course do your follow-up, but understand that there's a lot going on. They wear many hats. The other thing, it's a very closely knit environment. So be mindful of what you say. If you work for a past employer who's in the nonprofit space, you always want to be mindful of how you speak of a former employer, of course, but understand that in the nonprofit world, the person interviewing you may have affiliations or collaborations with another nonprofit, so you want to really pay attention to how you represent your time at another nonprofit organization. And just to bring it back, it's all about the mission, and also to be mindful of the budgetary constraints. Nonprofit is not corporate, and another very big difference is the salary. So if you're going to negotiate a salary at a nonprofit organization, and you do your homework and you benchmark what a marketing director looks like in nonprofit versus corporate, they are two very different salaries. So you want to understand that when negotiating, there may be a divergence. So do your homework and understand what that looks like from a budgetary perspective.
Great. How does one adjust their approach for the corporate for-profit? Would you like to answer that?
Yeah, sure. Finally, a non-piggyback answer. So, when you're looking at a profit-making industry, you obviously always have to come up with a value add, right? Your approach needs to be that you're putting something on the table that's going to either save money or make money, or you're at least not going to be a liability or a cost to the company, right? There are sectors, like I don't know what majors are around. I'm looking at diverse faces, and I'm assuming that there's going to be a lot of majors which are like accounting or HR, which inevitably are going to be cost to a company because HR and legal doesn't make the company money. They essentially save the company money in whichever indirect form. So you always have to come up with the approach that you're adding value. Always have a game plan, always have a pitch ready that how you can contribute as little as it is, even if it's 0.2%, but make it known to the interviewer that, hey, this is what you bring to the table, and over a turn, like 10 steps forward, you will actually be saving that. Whatever skill sets that you bring to the table will save the company money. Have that approach. Definitely have a business mindset. Look business professional. Definitely do not walk in there in jeans and t-shirt unless you're going for Amazon or Google. That's a different story, or any startups. But typically in a business oriented organization, you want to look like a business person. You want to look someone presentable, someone confident, someone that other people will not only respect but also look up to, right? I'm assuming that not everyone here is going to have their first job. Some people are probably have worked in the past and they're going to go back into their career or a different path of career. Don't forget what you have learned, but also adapt to what the industry has evolved into. Make sure you understand the changes. It's always changing. With millennials taking over almost half the world, there's a lot of us that are constantly learning what the new culture is. Every company when you walk into, you will find a different set of people. The old people that are baby boomers, that are still there because of they were there with the advent of the company, and then the new people that actually came in and were cultural ambassadors and have changed the company to a new era where they appeal to the new people, to the new target market, so to speak. So always adjust adapt, be adaptable, be coachable. Don't be very rigid in your approach, and you'll see that you'll constantly find yourself employed.
Can I piggyback on you?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I agree with everything that Shaw said. I would just add a couple of additional things. So as Michelle talked a lot about the mission really being what nonprofit hiring teams want to make sure you're passionate about. In the corporate world, make sure that you understand the business and the products and the services of the company that you're applying to. I just had an example a couple of weeks ago. I was interviewing a candidate. It was a phone interview, but nonetheless it was an important interview. And the Wyndham Worldwide Corporation actually has 3 distinctly different segments of business. And this particular individual kept talking about hotels, which is actually not the segment that we were interviewing for. So as Michelle and Shaw had mentioned, doing your homework and making sure that you understand the businesses and the segment is really important. That's going to show the employer that you get it. Know the competitors. Who are the biggest competitors? Anytime we interview people at Wyndham, we're always hearing about Marriott and Starwood and Hilton. By the way, Wyndham is the best, just to say. So just make sure that you know things like that. The other thing too, and this is sometimes a little bit more difficult to figure out, and this is where I love LinkedIn, hopefully LinkedIn is something that you're all familiar with, is try to understand for the position that you're interviewing in, corporate companies usually have more structure, more organization structure. Michelle talked about in the nonprofit, sometimes you can have 5 jobs as one person. Depending on the size of a company, a lot of corporate companies, especially Fortune 500s, have departments. So definitely try to understand if you're interviewing for a job, for example, in marketing, where does the marketing organization report into? Does it report directly to the CEO? Is it part of a broader commercial organization? Does marketing report into sales? Sales report into marketing? By the way, neither group likes that. They're both important. So that'll also help you ask some relevant questions and understand who you're going to work with when you get there. Even within marketing, you've got brand marketing, B2B marketing, B2C marketing, digital marketing. So there's a lot of different segments. So definitely do your homework. Look people up on LinkedIn who work for that company. Take a look at their job titles, what they do. You can usually try to piece together roughly what an organization looks like. So you have even one more advantage when you walk in the door, that you've really done your homework to learn the company.
Lisa, one question candidates always receive is, tell us about yourself. How can one perfect this elevator speech? And are there any key items that one should always mention or never mention?
So very simply put, an elevator speech is exactly what the name implies. This is those chance encounters where you happen to be in an elevator, perhaps with a very important person, and that person says, "So, Suzanne, what's new?" Or, "What are you working on in accounting these days?" Or, "Tell me about yourself. Are you interviewing with us?" That interview elevator speech probably lasts about the length of an elevator ride, which is what? Well, depending where you are, sometimes could be up to a minute. So you want to make sure that you have a well thought out, articulated, succinct message. And Shaw, Michelle, and I, and Suzanne can probably tell you this because we interview a lot. We meet so many people when we're interviewing. And when someone says, "Hi, my name is Donna, and I work in accounting, and I handle general ledgers and journal entries," we've probably heard that 500 times in a year. That's not going to stand out. If someone comes in and says, "Hi, I'm Susanna, and I'm an accountant, and I figure out ways to maximize the value of our spend in a company," that's getting my attention if I'm a finance leader. If I'm an HR leader, which I am, what will get my attention is I find ways to maximize the potential of our company's talent. I'm listening. Tell me more. I'll remember you. So think about it, and I would actually recommend that you write it down and you practice it. You have the 30-second version, the 1-minute version, or by chance you're waiting for the elevator and you've got a couple of minutes, but it's exactly what Shaw said. How are you different from the 500 other accounting people that I've spoken to? Why do you stand out, and how do you add value? In the corporate world, it's all about value. And if you do that and you do it and you practice with a friend and be really succinct, we will remember that.
God, Lisa, where were you when I first applied for my first job, for my first interview? Very, very valuable words. Trust me, we've seen it. We've done the mistakes ourselves in the beginning, but you guys are very lucky that you guys are getting this sort of an exposure to your first jobs, for the first job, the people that are graduating. But take it, it's almost as if the system can go wrong. Like it's proven that those elevator speeches or those approaches or the ways, the techniques to differentiate yourself from the rest of the crowd, you're actually, keep this in mind, and this is off the topic, but you're competing most likely with people that have people inside the company, that know people in there, that have that added upper hand on you. So you almost got to be better than them to be treated equal to them, right? Always walk into that, unless you have an uncle or anybody or a friend or somebody that recommended you, right? That's a different story. But at the same time, don't take that for granted, because the people that are interviewing are unbiased. Assume that they're completely unbiased. They will not take any recommendations. They will hire you based on your value add. So make sure you stand out. Figure every possible way to stand out to that person or to the interview panel. Yeah.
If I could just, my turn to piggyback on what's already been said, really good. And just as a follow-up to the elevator speech, which should be enticing and should be attention capturing. So you want to also keep in mind, you want it to generate questions. You want that person that you're pitching to come back and say, "Oh, well, really, how did you do this, or how did you do that?" So maybe a good follow-up or a thought process or exercise would be to anticipate what those follow-up questions are, and then have a backup to your elevator speech. What conversation do you hope to generate from the speech, and what additional information can you provide from the questions that come from the person who's asking about you?
Absolutely, absolutely. And one final point, present yourself as being coachable. If you're talking to a person like that, always tell them and make it known that you want to learn from that person, how that person has come to the other side of the table and succeeded. You want to learn, and you're open to be mentored, you're open to be coached. Make it known. Always make the other, it's almost like saying massage the other person's or your interviewer's personality or the interviewer's ego. Make them feel special. If you make them feel special, right away you already are on positive brownie points. And that you will stand out. Don't make it to a point where it sounds like you're trying to please or persuade the person. No, just make it known that you admire their leadership or what they have achieved, and you want to get there someday. Keep it simple and keep it straight.
Yeah, remember, have you guys heard the acronym WIFM? Anybody? What's in it for me? If you can tell somebody what's in it for them, they're going to listen.
Very interesting. Michelle, can you explain the approach to the interview from the recent graduate's perspective versus the applicant looking to advance or change careers?
Sure. So very different approaches. So I'll start with a recent college graduate going out into the job world for seemingly the first time, and the interviewer will know that. And if you're interviewing someone for an entry level position, they're going to know you're not going to have a lot of on-the-job experience. So what you want to focus on being a recent college graduate is what your transferable skills are. Life skills. They could be things you've learned in class that could relate to the job. They could be part-time jobs or internships you've had where you've had experiences or behaviors that could apply to the job that you're interviewing for. Also any sports that you participate in. So being part of a team in sports shows that you have that team mentality and you can work well in a team. It also shows drive and competitiveness. So you may want to highlight that. Another thing for me personally that I like to see is if you've traveled a lot, that may seem unintuitive at some areas, but what that shows to me is that you're cultured. You've seen a lot of different things. You're culturally aware. You've had exposure to different types of atmospheres and people and rituals and cultures. So that makes you a more well-rounded person. We live in a very globalized economy and job market. So to the extent that you understand diversity and are sensitive to it, you may want to highlight travel, which seems like a recreational or fun or a nice to do. And really bring that in as to how it relates and translates to how you can perform or act on the job. So just switching gears as to how it would relate if you're interviewing for someone who has switched careers or is in the process of switching careers, very different approach. That would imply that you have had some on-the-job experience, but now you're going to have a different set of experiences. So I guarantee you a question that an interviewer will have when you're applying for a job in a different field than what your track record or resume outlines is, why are you looking to change? So you want to have that elevator speech ready and be able to explain why the change at this point in your career. The follow-up question will be, well, what have you done to prepare yourself for the change? So I go back to those transferable skills. So if you were a manager for 5 years in one job in communications and now you're interviewing for an HR position, management is a transferable skill, so you want to be able to focus on that and say, well, this is what I bring to the table in terms of my past experience, but I'm looking to explore new opportunities and what your personal reasons, what your story is really about wanting to change careers and how you plan to get there, if you've taken courses or what you've done to support that change in your life at that point in your life.
Yeah, absolutely. Very good question. Yeah, could you, I'll repeat the question. So, very good question. She asked, what's your name, I'm sorry? Chandika? Tandika? Okay, Tandika. So Tandika asked a very important question, which a lot of you might actually experience as well. How can you use your study abroad experience on your resume, and how do you use it to a positive spin, right? So study abroad, I mean, it's pretty much the same as any other traveling experience or any other cultural diversity experience that you've attained. You wanna, if you mention it on the resume, you can always put it on the extracurricular, that it's always important that you've traveled, and because of, you can mention the reasons why you have traveled. It's because of study abroad, or you have a hobby or a passion, or you made it a point, you made an early on decision that by the age of so-and-so you want to see 1/3 of the world, or you want to have finished Europe or South America. Many other reasons. It shows passion. It shows that you're passionate about some things. More than often, and unless like I don't know of any company, there's absolutely no company that I can think of that does not promote work-life balance, unless you're living in China or some other country where you don't want to be at, right? But at the same time, like in America, it's extremely important that we promote work-life balance. We want to make sure that a person is working hard and playing harder, or like it's a colloquial term that we use, but essentially what you're trying to do is you're trying to tell the interviewer that I have other things that I do aside from just working 8 to 10 hours. And I'll use a story to that note. A friend of mine I used to play soccer with. I actually play soccer every summer. It's a league, and this is a very senior guy. He's almost in his almost in his 60s, Now, he was a partner at IBM. Now, I kind of got close to him. I wanted to be him someday. It was early on in my career. And he told me how he first got his first break at IBM. He actually had no qualification, educational qualification to be doing anything at IBM at all. He was a women's soccer coach for the major part of his, and he had an independent business of his own, but his leadership qualities were actually just a women's soccer coach. For 2 years back to back, he took that team and he won 2 championships for them. Like, his team won 2 championships under his coaching. That itself, that story alone rang a bell with IBM leaders, and they wanted somebody with that kind of leadership skill who can take departments and take it to the next level. So imagine how unrelated IBM, we're talking about the international business managers, like pretty much the technology heads of the world. And then we have this guy who has no technical experience at all, but he was just a women's soccer coach. So as you can tell, anything that you do that you have succeeded on and that you've excelled on has value in the real market, in the job market. Unless you're like an accountant or a doctor or a lawyer, you need particular skill sets for those, right? But at the same time, don't disregard what you're doing right now. Anything that you do that you love, that you are passionate about, has value out there. You just need to find somebody who's going to give you that value. So, sorry, I sound like more like a motivational speaker,
That's a great
but
story.
That's great. Shah, this next one's for you.
oh God.
What key questions can you anticipate, and how do you answer a difficult interview question? For example, tell me about your weaknesses, or tell me about a time you were not successful.
Every interview that you will ever attend in your life, you will get this question. Mark my words. There's not a single interview. I think even if you're interviewing for a wedding proposal, your in-laws will ask you this question. It is imperative that you have an honest answer to this question. The way the world has evolved, the way interviewers have evolved, they can smell through your BS. Trust me when I say this. And excuse my French on this, but no interviewer wants to hear a spin to a weakness that you're mentioning that actually almost sounds like a strength. Don't tell them I work too hard for my own good. Don't tell them that. They know you don't have any clue of what hard work is if it's your first job. Be honest, be very real. Tell them a real challenge that you're facing. Like, let's just say if it's a time management. Like, a lot of people use time management as a very generic, cliche answer. But if you really have a time management issue, then do mention that. It's not going to work against you. But don't just mention it to sound good or to sound cliche. Have an answer ready of what you're doing to improve in whatever weakness it is. If it is you're too much of a yes person, you don't know how to say no, don't be afraid to mention that. Just say it out loud that yes, I have a problem in refusing or saying no to something. So if people keep asking me to do something, I tend to incline to leave my stuff, to leave my own task and help someone else out. Not a bad answer at all. A lot of people have that weakness. I myself had that weakness. I still sometimes struggle with it. And I'm sure Lisa and Michelle have had these challenges and when you first started your career, and even now perhaps, and you're probably coaching people. If you have if you're not a morning person, right? A legit problem. A lot of people, and when I first started my career, I was afraid to tell people that I'm not a morning person. Why? Because I thought that then I might not get a job because everyone is expected to be there by 8:30 or 9, right? So obviously they're going to look at me, they're like, you're going to sleep throughout the entire morning. But don't be afraid. There's other ways. These days, interviewers and employers are very practical. They themselves aren't morning people or weren't morning people at some point in their lives. But have an answer ready of how you're remedying the situation. Let's just say you sleep early now, or you became more of a coffee person, or you've kind of scheduled your life in a way where you've played around with your sleep time, and now you know how much time you actually need, how much sleep you actually need to function properly. Those are constructive answers that they want to hear. They just don't want to hear your problem, because otherwise they're going to assume that's going to be an ongoing problem, right? So that's essentially the mindset that you want. I can't tell for each and every one what your weaknesses are, but you guys know who you are. So make sure you write it down, be real, be honest, and don't be afraid.
Okay. Michelle, at the end of every interview, we know it gets turned around to the candidate with what questions do you have for us? How do you prepare and ask the right questions during the interview process, and what is the interviewer looking for here?
Sure. So never be afraid to ask questions. In fact, I would encourage that you should have questions. Never decline the opportunity to learn more about a company or to display your natural curiosity, because that's what the question process is. And also keep in mind, the interview process is a two-way street. Yes, the interviewer is asking questions of you because they want to determine whether or not you would be a good fit for the company. But conversely, you should be interviewing the interviewer, because that's going to be your potential job that you're going to spend many hours, years potentially at this place. So you want to make sure you're going into it with eyes wide open and knowing as much as you can and want to know about the company. So be prepared in your questions. So steer away from generic questions, because as interviewers we all know what those are. And some generic questions are okay, but the more specific and pointed that you can have your questions be. And this comes from your research. So if in doing your homework about a company you learn things, not everything is going to be readily apparent or clear. So you may want to keep those in your notes to follow up and get clarity during the interview with. Also, be a very active listener during the interview process. And this may take practice, and this is why it helps to rehearse and role play, because you're nervous at the interview. Most of us are going to be nervous. So you want to be able to kind of have that nervousness, accept it, but also be present enough to be able to actively listen to what the interviewer is saying, because that in itself may generate additional questions. Take notes, because you may not always remember as the conversation goes along what you're going to want to follow up and ask questions about. So ask many questions, and what this means, getting back to the second part of the question, is the interviewer wants to hear what your curiosity is, how you're thinking, what questions you're asking. I'm always impressed when I am sometimes specifically or intentionally rather vague about when I describe a job, when a candidate comes in, because I want them to really probe at me and follow up, where does this position report into, or what does it do, and really if they can translate what I've said and kind of play back what I've said and take it to the next level and follow up and ask specific questions, then it goes a long way in impressing the interviewer. You never, one word of caution I will leave you with is, you never want to ask a question that you should know the answer to prior to coming in, right? So not to oversimplify, but you never want to go into an interview and enthusiastically ask, well, what does this company do, right? Of course you should know that going in. So if you can research it and find the answer, that should not be one of the questions you ask. So you can feel free to ask questions, especially if the interviewer is someone that you may potentially be reporting to. Okay to try to understand what motivates them, what they're looking for in terms of a team member, what some of the success factors that they perceive in their colleagues are. So things that will set you up to understand what the expectations are should you get the job are all valid and legitimate questions to ask.
Great. Shaw, this one's for you. Is there a time or a certain way to negotiate?
Wow. So now we're talking about the money. So that's essentially why everyone is working, or essentially everyone should be going for an interview, for the paycheck, the monetary aspect of it. So when do you actually start negotiating, right? That's the grand question. So never on the first interview, definitely not. So there's a technique behind it. I've kind of I used to think of this and question myself a lot, and I used to always wonder, and I used to get different timings from different candidates about when they asked me that question. And I've noticed one thing, what always stumped me and how I always had the bottom hand in the conversation as an interviewer is what I'm going to tell you what the interviewee should be doing. So, and don't do this at Morgan Stanley if you're talking to me on the phone or in person, because now I'm giving you my trick. So typically what happens, I'll ask you a question first. In a relationship, and anyone can take a shot at this, in a relationship, any relationship, who has the upper hand? Or who is in power? Who is in charge in any of your relationships? Does anyone want to take a shot?
Depends on who wants to take the upper hand.
Okay, good shot, definitely. But the scoring shot was whoever shows that he or she cares the least, right? Think about it. when you're in a relationship, the one in any of your relationships, parents or employer or even in your personal relationships, girlfriend, boyfriend, or husband, wife, whoever is showing less care tends to be more on the upper hand of the relationship, has more control. So when do you negotiate? Because this is the point where we're deciding now whether whether we want to pay you what you think you deserve, or whether you're okay, whether I can undercut you and get you at a lower compensation. You should always start negotiating when you present to the interviewer that you have another opportunity. You should let the interviewer know that, hey, I have other interviews that I'm going with right now, and these are the offers that I'm getting. These are the numbers that are being presented. Be realistic. Don't be too greedy. I mean, as Gordon Gekko said, that greed is good, not on your first job. Don't try to get something out of the range that you're not deserving of. So make sure the interviewer knows that you have other opportunities that you're looking at. There's other people that are willing to pay you the market compensation that you deserve. Right away at that point, you should start mentioning numbers, and you should start telling them, okay, this is what I think I should be making, and let them know that, hey, but I'm negotiable. I'm negotiable to the opportunity. I'm negotiable to the leadership skills that you guys are presenting, to the upward growth, the upward mobility that I have. If you're all about the money, 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 then trust me, you won't get a job. You might as well look somewhere else. But if you present that you know your worth, at the same time you know what their worth is, and both of them come hand in hand and see eye to eye, you're more than likely going to hit a jackpot there. Or at least leave with a good note where they're going to remember you the next time, and they're going to know that you were very professional with your negotiation, you weren't too greedy, and you knew your worth. Any questions? Anything? Yeah?
So, when you fill out an application, it asks you for a minimum salary.
Mm-hmm.
So, I'm always hesitant about putting a number down because I'm only going to negotiate, and you can't write going to negotiate, so I can't put down a number.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm always worried that if I put too low of a number, something could take advantage of me to give me that low number.
Mm-hmm.
So I always want to try to go a little bit higher than I expect.
Mm-hmm.
So what is actually the right thing?
The absolute right thing, there's no science, because it's a very human factor. It can vary from who's reading on the other side. It also can vary from what mindset the person is in. If the person had a bad morning and fought with his wife before coming to work and is looking at your application, chances are you're probably not going to get even a call. So beware of all those aspects. There are a lot of moving parts that are involved, right? But to answer your question, and so that you don't feel like I give you a political answer, there is a medium point. Like, there is a range. There's always, like, let's just say in a starting level, you should know when you're doing your research about your own field that what the starting salaries are. Those information are actually public, out in the public, and there's always, every year there's a survey that happens, and all the different fields, all that data is out there for us in the open. So make sure you know, first of all, what the ranges are, and then pick the medium number. But at the same time, always, like, in parentheses, because there's no limit of characters that you can put, always in parentheses put negotiable, right? That itself shows that, okay, fine, you're not looking for that number exactly, or you can go up. Negotiable doesn't always mean that they're going to go down or take you down. Negotiable could also mean upwards. A lot of people miss that whole notion. It has a negative connotation to it, the whole negotiable part. But a lot of people, I have personally hired people at a higher rate than what they had originally put on their application. Why? Because the market data didn't allow me to hire them at that rate. Somebody else undercut them, so I had to bring them up to what they were worth. Two things happen with that. One is I'm showing you a good faith. I'm showing, while I'm hiring you, I'm actually deciding, okay, fine, yeah, you're coming on board thinking that, hey, they didn't actually undercut me, they didn't lowball me. And second of all, I'm hiring you at a rate where nobody else, none of my competitors are going to come and swoop you away with 10, 15 grand more, right? So I'm essentially avoiding attrition. I'm essentially avoiding you being greedy and go somewhere else. So it's very important that I welcome, or we welcome as employers, the employees on a market data, which is a fair number. So always, yeah, stick to the medium ground. You should be okay.
And can I also add, we were talking a lot about the money, which is ultimately the driving factor, but I wouldn't underestimate the total compensation package. So understand that there are other components that make up what your compensation is, and so those are things like benefits, right? Do they have a good health plan? If not, you may be paying a lot of money out of pocket, which will significantly reduce your salary. Do they have a retirement plan in place that could, is an addition to what you're making, an addition that you won't see immediately, but for long-term savings, and other perks and things that are added to the paycheck, so to speak. So it's the total compensation. It's bonuses, it's benefits, it's perks, it's everything that's salary plus that you want to, when making an apples-to-apples comparison, if you're deciding on 2 or 3 different jobs, you want to really lay them out side by side and really see what, one company could be offering you 50,000 and another 70, but the larger salary may come with costs and expenses of 20 or 30,000. So is that really the better choice if you're just looking at dollar for dollar comparison? So keep that in mind as well.
Yeah, the last thing that I would add, especially given where we are in the Northeast, so we're right across the river from New York City. And one of the things that employers in this particular area we always face is the competition from our friends in New York. And I would ask you, just think about commute and quality of life, especially nowadays. I mean, you can always make more money, you can always have better benefits, but you can't pack more time into a day. You can't bring back those baseball games that you've missed and that quality time with your family. So I can't stress enough the respect I have for Shaw's and Michelle's answers. It's really holistic. We were just in the process we hired a candidate who actually lived on Long Island, and she worked in New York City. And so in talking to her about why she may want to think about coming to Wyndham in addition to the job, we were talking about you're going to avoid your commuter tax because you're paying that. If you work in New York City and you don't live in New York City, you're paying for your actual commute, taking the trains to get to the city. And then your commute itself is about 1 hour and 40 minutes each way. So everybody's got a different perspective. Everybody's got different priorities and levels of tolerance for different things. But what you may trade off in compensation, you may get back in terms of being closer to home, being able to leave the office at 4:30 and being at your child's softball game in 20 minutes. So be holistic in how you look at it. Certainly compensation is really important, but I don't know if you're hearing this, but we are hearing a lot more, particularly of students coming out of school, about this more holistic quality of life is very important to them. They want to know, will I really be able to take my vacation? Because I want to go off and serve and do something, to have a purpose-driven vacation. So think about all of those things. You obviously need to have a certain financial level where you can survive, but put a value on what these other things are worth to you as well. And then, as Shaw said, you'll start to come up with a number that feels right in the grand scheme of things.
This question's for you, Lisa, even though I know Michelle briefly touched on it. How do you effectively use your listening skills in an interview?
Someone once said to me, and I always remember this, I'm a quote person, so I love to keep quotes in my mind. When you're listening to someone, are you hearing what they're saying or are you waiting to speak? And I have to ask myself that, just like probably most of us in the room do at certain points. Showing an interviewer that you're listening is both, it's subtle and it's overt. So, the subtle is kind of leaning in appropriately, slightly leaning in toward an interviewer. Shaw's asking a question, leaning forward. Okay, I understand that. Visibly giving them cues that you're listening. I would recommend nodding versus saying yes, I know, because you don't want to break the rhythm of the interview. And for some folks, that may be seen as potentially interrupting. Don't interrupt. If you have a question, wait for a natural break in the conversation or jot down a note. I know that sometimes when I see somebody taking a note, I'll pause and say, it sounds like something there maybe you want to talk about a little bit more. Is there a question? But just giving them that courtesy, making the eye contact, giving them the affirmative nods, just like if you're talking to a parent or your other, showing them that you have their full attention. Rule number 1. Does anybody know what that is? With those little electronic handheld devices? Turn the phone off. Don't put it on vibrate. Turn it off. Keep it in your pocket. Keep it in your bag. Because if you have it on vibrate or you have it on the desk and you see the little envelope come in or you see a little text, you just naturally get distracted. So put it away, leave it in the car, and have your full attention dedicated to the interviewer. I was just talking with someone yesterday who told me that he's had several instances where the phone's gone off, and in some instances, the candidate said, "I'll just be 1 second, can you hold on?" Guess what? Guess what's probably going to happen? If I don't deserve your time and attention in an interview, how do I know I'm going to deserve your time and attention if you're working as part of my team, if you're that easily distracted? And unfortunately, we hear a lot of those stories. I don't know if you've...
Oh, horror stories.
There's a level of informality that's come into the workplace in the advent of smartphones and social media, but take it to the highest level of professionalism and be conservative with the dress, with how you correspond with people, with how you listen to people. Or I've even had candidates say, OMG. It's okay, in a corporate setting, I get it. I like to think I'm still young, even though my husband may not. But there's just a level of professionalism that, trust me, it will differentiate you. Because unfortunately, some of the examples that I'm describing are the norm. So I will tend to remember somebody who they leaned in, they were courteous, they waited for the natural pause. Just do those things, because it's not only about what you know, it's about how you're conducting yourself and how you answer the questions and how you listen to what the other person has to say and make them feel that they're important. These are all the things that go into the formula of differentiating you from the other 30 people that manager's spoken to.
And it's also, I'll say it again, about your presence and some of the nonverbal cues. So be mindful, aside from technology and the phone being an obvious distractor, you should not also put barriers. So a couple of instances where I can cite where I had a candidate who came in, sat across from me, ready, charged up for the interview, comes in and puts a bag on the table, and it's like this barrier between us, and it was like I almost felt like they didn't want to speak to me or make eye contact, and all I could focus on was that, wow, there's a nice Louis Vuitton bag across from me, so I felt like I should be interviewing the bag and not the person. Subsequently, another person came in, we're in the age of technology, she came in ready, prepared for the interview, and pulled up her laptop, and again, this barrier, the laptop. I don't want to speak to a laptop. I want to speak to you as an individual, as a person. To make it take it a step further, when I asked her about, her knowledge of the corporation and the homework she did, right? I keep stressing the homework in your research. She pulled up her website and she read from the website. So, understand that these are things that go on, and yes, the technology's there and it's great and it can be useful, but know when it's useful and know what your body language is saying and the barriers that you're putting up sometimes between you and the interviewer rather. So you want to keep it just focused, direct, non-distractive, and be all about the person that's sitting across from you.
I'll tell you an ugly truth. The interviewer or the company doesn't really need you guys. Know this when you're walking in. You have to create a need, right? You need the interviewer. So the interviewer automatically will have an attitude that sometimes they'll talk more, they will cut you off, but you can't fire them. You're not hiring them. They're hiring you. So many a times you will come across a person who's not really like the perfect interviewer, so to speak. They will keep talking, or they'll put two, three questions together and expect you to know the answers or follow the answers chronologically. Get into a habit of writing down while the interviewer is talking. Write down your thoughts so that you don't forget your thoughts, because sometimes you hit a flash of genius at the moment when they're talking, but then when you're about to answer, you forgot exactly your chain of thought. So get into a habit of writing down, taking little notes, cues of or what the question was. If there's 2-3 questions put together, before you even start the interview, always get into a habit of asking the interviewer, do you mind if I take notes while I'm talking to you? Because that way, you've given them the respect. At the same time, you're prepared to take down notes, right? They won't feel insulted if you're not paying attention to what they're saying. They already know you're taking notes. So get into those etiquettes and habits. And the other thing that Michelle mentioned, very, very important, eye contact. Okay, eye contact is key. That is that is giving the nonverbal communication to the interviewer about your confidence level. You're not shy, you're not looking left, right, center, up and down, you're actually looking eye to eye to the interviewer, and when you're giving your answers. Those are certain things that will stand out, that'll make you stand out. But yeah, the taking notes part was very helpful for me over time, because I've noticed that when I went for my own interviews, I'm talking to people that are already successful, that have already gotten where they are. That's why they're on the other side of the table. So they could care less. They're presenting their ego. They're sometimes a little bit more arrogant than what you're expecting them to be. So be prepared for that. It's not a perfect world, but you got to make your presentation perfect. Don't expect perfection from the other side.
Yeah, just one other thing as I'm listening. So it's a matter of balance, right? Some of the basics, Michelle talked about the person who plopped the bag on, that goes without saying. But if you have, so we talk about eye contact. So having eye contact is a great thing, but you want to avoid this intense eye contact where it feels like you're glaring. You want to lean in, but you don't want it to feel like, okay. Or even, yes, and taking notes at everything. So it's a matter of balance. There is such a thing of overdoing. So you want to make it natural, practice with somebody, ask them to critique you. If you ever have an opportunity to be filmed, it's a wonderful thing. It's a little bit humbling when you see it for the first time. Do I really do that? But that's the type of thing that you'll have that down to a science. So you'll know just the right level of eye contact. You'll know how to inflect your voice. You'll know when to lean in. You'll know when to lean back. A lot of times people think that, okay, I'm going to sit with my arms folded the whole time for the interview because I'm being respectful. And sometimes interviewers will comment and say, wow, the person seemed really stiff. We have more of an informal culture. Will they fit? So it's all about that moderation. Watch other people, practice. The interviewer sometimes is just as nervous as you are. So the more you practice, the more you learn, the more you study things that fit with your natural tendencies, the more natural it will be, and it'll come off as natural versus rehearsed or forced or trying to be something that you're normally not.
Great, and we just talked about electronic devices. Is there ever an instance where you should bring an electronic device, such as an iPad, to show your portfolio or anything like that?
Yeah, I'll take a shot at that. Depends. Depends on what company, what kind of culture you're walking into. If it's these days there's a lot of startups, there are a lot of web technology companies, there are a lot of companies that are very progressive with their technology. That's where you want to show off your technical skills, right? So obviously you're going to walk in not with like paper and like a whole bunch of files, but you're going to walk in with an electronic device where you can just sweep left, right, center, up and down, and you're almost there, right? Or if you're, let's just say if you're interviewing at a book company, at a electronic book company, like there's Audible, there's other booksellers like Barnes and Noble or any other company, like those companies where their products. They have products out there that are important to them, that is an ego booster to them. So you want to walk in with one of their products, maybe like a Nook or like that kind of stuff, where they will feel like you're actually a user of their technology. You appreciate what their product is out there. So it all depends. But if you're going into an investment bank, or if you're going into any other a nonprofit that are not necessarily or even a hotel chain, they're not necessarily a technology company. You want to come in, you don't want to go in with a bunch of gadgets. You don't want to be Mr. or Inspector Gadget. You actually want to just be more presentable. You want to cater to what the position that you're going for, right? So it all depends. It's a very subjective answer.
And also a couple of things, you spoke about portfolios. So jobs that lend themselves to portfolios, I'm thinking graphic arts or something like that. You want to, as the interviewer, as part of the vetting of the candidates, want to see that portfolio prior to bringing the person in. So sometimes when we advertise for jobs that lend themselves to graphic or technical, we'll ask to see, as part of their application process, a link to your portfolio. When in doubt, also, if you're in a field that lends itself to technological presentation or bringing the technology to the interview, I wouldn't have it front and center at the interview, but maybe ask permission from the interviewer. Oh, would you mind if I showed you this, or is it appropriate that I open up my website and show you what I've done? Get the permission so you understand that the interviewer is not being put off or distracted by the technology, but rather you're asking permission to enhance your presence and your skills at the interview.
Certainly.
Great. Changing gears a little bit. Michelle, what kind of cultural awareness issues need to be considered in the application interview process and on the job?
Yeah, sure. So I spoke earlier about we're a globalized world, right? The internet brings us closer together, so we want to be aware of the company that we're interviewing with. So this goes back again to the research portion of the program. So if you know you're interviewing with a multinational company or a company that's headquartered overseas or has a different culture, you want to understand, if possible, how much of that culture, if it's not westernized or American, is really impacting the day-to-day operations vis-a-vis your interview with that company. So you want to be mindful if you know that they're a company that's culturally different than your own. You want to be aware of what the cultural differences are, the diversity, everything from your application and how you write. You want to write concisely and clearly and properly, to how you speak. Communications is a big thing, and especially if there's a cultural difference or divide, you want to make sure nothing is lost in translation, so to speak. So speak concisely. Don't want to use regional slang or terms that may not be readily understandable to someone who's not local. It's also how respecting the ethics and the formality of the culture that you're interviewing with. So understand, if it's a formal culture, you really want to dress the part, the way you present, the way you speak. Know your role in the interview. So some more formalized cultures will have you take a passive approach to the interview, whereas we as a westernized culture are more aggressive in the selling. I want to be aggressive. Mm-hmm. This is me. This is what I can do. Let me show you, and kind of in your face almost. So understand that could be off-putting to some interviewers, especially if there's a cultural difference, mm-hmm. where they would respect a little bit more of a passive approach. And if it's not readily apparent from the website or the research that you've done on the company as to what their internal cultures and how you should prepare for that interview, take cue from the interviewer. So if they're leading the interview and cutting you off when they've had the appropriate amount of information, don't be off-put by that, but maybe understand that it's innate to their culture or the culture of the organization. Also data for you to understand if this is off-putting to you, and this may be an indicator of what the culture is like. Is that really a good fit for you? So just be open, be flexible, keep an open mind, don't judge, and just recognize the differences and go with them and embrace them.
I would add to that, promote the culture that you're studying in. For anybody that's going in for the first job, you don't really have much to speak about as far as your experience is concerned, but you studied for 4 years at a world-class university, right? What's the difference between an Ivy League and Kean? I don't see any difference. When I went to Kean, I actually thought, I felt, and I believed that I am no different than any Ivy Leagues. When we went to any other conventions like Model UN and stuff, we actually were toe-to-toe with Harvard and Yale people. So don't think that you're any different than them, or any. I would go to the extent that you should always believe and walk as if like you're going to the best university on the planet. So use that, the 4 years of your college experience, translate that to them as your cultural experience, as your corporate experience, or what you've learned in classrooms, teamwork. Use that as a big advocate for yourself, for your resume, because those are things that you're not going to write down on your resume what you've done, but mention those things, because that's something that every company looks for. Are you a team player? The cultural diversity that we have here, right? You are able to work with different cultures, with different people, with different backgrounds. Those are certain. I mean, with globalization intensely, that what's going on, Michelle mentioned. Everyone, chances are, if you start off your job here, and if the company has a foreign location, and you have presented yourself as a person that is global, that is very that is capable of adapting themselves, then you will be sent to a foreign location, and that just kicks your career to a whole different level, right? So use everything that you're learning in these 4 years as if it were a job that you were here in 4 years, right? And then present that to the employer as if you had 4 years of experience. What do you mean I didn't have experience? I was actually from freshman year, I knew what I wanted to do, and this is what I did. I've focused my goal on everything that I wanted to do down the road when I hit the real world. And two things will happen. One, you will show how passionate you are about your university, and B, two, if that person knows anybody or is working with any Kean alumni, or if the person himself is a Kean alumni, then boom, that's a brownie point right there. That's a big up. So use that. Everything that you've done, even if you are part of a Greek culture, activities that you've done, do mention those things. There is a huge alumnus out there of the Greek culture that I personally have hired some people that were in ZBT and that were at Kean University, and I was like, wow, it's phenomenal, because I was part of the Greek culture and part of Kean. So I always look for those kind of people, people that are from my background, right? So meaning Kean background. So yeah, promote yourself, promote your university, promote the 4 years, and you'll find yourself in good spots. We have some great talent out there that graduated from Kean. So.
Great. Lisa mentioned that she likes to use quotes. We have a quote of yours. Say what you mean what you say, and don't be mean when you say it. Would you elaborate on that?
Sure. So a lot of people ask me just if I have general advice, having had the opportunity to work in a couple of industries and work with people from all over the world. And I would say that there's two things that they kind of hold the test no matter who you're dealing with and where they're coming from, and that is sincerity and respect. And so I love that quote. I think it's actually the title of a book. I have to really look up who the author is so I can give him proper credit. But it really is about say what you mean what you say, so that's the sincerity, and don't be mean when you say it. People just want to know that they matter and that they're treated with dignity and respect. And when you're in the interview game, whether you're the interviewer or the interviewee, there's way more times you hear no and you don't hear what you want to hear than you hear yes. I've had situations where I have one position and 300 people apply. So I'm going to have to tell 299 people who probably are great people, and a big number of those who could have done the job, that you're not the one for us. And so there's a way that you say that you want that person to walk away, number one, with a good experience about your company, because just because you weren't selected for this role may not mean that you may not be a fit for the next role. So I want to keep that rapport open. Second, folks have probably heard about Glassdoor, Twitter, social media. People are much more apt to say things and speak out when they've had a bad experience. And a lot of times when they've had a bad experience, it's because they've been treated badly. They've been disrespected. There is nothing that bothers me more in the recruiting world, and I tell my recruiters this every day, with recruiters getting tagged with the whole black hole experience. I applied for a role and I never heard back. I was disrespected. Even worse, I was interviewed for a role and no one ever called me back. For goodness sake, you were interviewed, you met with folks. So it's really about respect and just being sincere. When I give feedback to candidates, there are times when candidates will ask you, is there something that I could have done better? Or is there a specific reason why I didn't get the job? A lot of times people may take the easy way out and say, what? Somebody else was more qualified? That's true in a lot of cases. Again, 300 people apply for a job, probably 50 of them are equally qualified. But if a candidate takes the time to ask you and they care that much to want to know what is it that I could have done better, would you give me some feedback? Think about the right way to say it if you're an interviewer, and think about the right way to receive it if you're a candidate. If a hiring manager is taking the time to give you very specific feedback, they care. They care. Take it to heart. And some candidates take the news well, some not so well, and I understand. Maybe this is the 10th time you've heard no. You're not going to be the person. So I think that's why I love that quote. Just the sincerity and respect in just being sincere in what you're saying and how you're saying it and meaning it has just served me well personally in every culture I've worked in, company culture, country culture. And that's probably the one piece of advice that anybody who knows me will usually hear me say this over and over again. I truly believe it. And I've just found that when I do that, people also reciprocate. So it just makes for a better life experience.
Great. Oh, well, next one's for you, Shah. Lisa mentioned LinkedIn. how important are LinkedIn or other social media platforms in the interview process?
Well, I'm going to start by saying very, very important. It's almost to a point where your resume is not as important as your social media profile is. And I'm guessing you guys all have a LinkedIn profile, right? Is there anybody that doesn't? Show of hand? No? No? Good. Excellent. So yeah, make sure your LinkedIn and your Facebook profile is presented and is decorated in a way that actually that you want people to look at you as. If your LinkedIn profile is very personal and it's just a personal show of your social life, then chances are that that's going to stand out, and that's going to not, I mean, in a negative way. So you want to make sure that your LinkedIn profile looks very professional. Now, a lot of people have Facebook profiles and other social media profiles that they're very passionate about, and they post their daily life and everything on it. Well and good, but make sure that it's not visible to the whole world. Make that visible only to your friends, to your immediate close circle. Because if it's public, and there is options to make it private and public, right? So make sure it's just visible to your friends. If there is something that you want the world to know, or your potential employers to know, only then make those posts public. So pick and choose, be very careful, because a lot of people, a lot of good people, great people, potential employees end up not getting their jobs because of some past posts or some past activities that they were engaged in that they forgot to either take off, or their privacy settings were not right. So I would urge you guys to go look back into if you guys are in the market and your resume is out there, make sure your name, whatever social media your name is associated with or your profile is associated with, make it presentable. Make sure it is something that if it's at an interview table and an interviewer is showing you, hey, is this you? You don't want to be embarrassed. Be prepared for that. There are some employers that are pretty obnoxious and that will show you, hey, I just came across this and so and so. Is this your profile? And if you don't want to be embarrassed in that scenario, then definitely look back into your privacy setting and make sure your profile is exactly what you want the world to know about you. And if it's something that you're passionate about, keep it private, keep it among your friends. Can't emphasize that more and more. I used to work for Amazon before Morgan Stanley, and we actually used to look into everybody's, from Twitter to Instagram to Facebook, LinkedIn, every social media known hub that is out there, we would look into that. Even Pinterest, at some point, we actually found postings that were not in line with what we were looking for. They were a little bit off track. So we had to not hire the person. So yeah, can't emphasize that more, guys. Definitely make sure you go back tonight and look into your privacy settings. Yes.
Mhm.
And probably you have to unfriend certain people from social media. So basically, is it a negative thing if you don't have a Facebook or a social media account?
Certainly not a negative thing, but again, it's a subjective thing. It depends on where you're applying, what kind of job you're going for. If it's a technology-based company, then most likely they will want to see that you're tech savvy. You understand and you appreciate those kind of aspects. Let's just say if you're going to work for Facebook, right? Let's just say if you're going into a Facebook interview, you would want to have a Facebook account, right? So like vice versa, if you're going into an Amazon interview, they would want to see that you appreciate their product. So no, it's not a bad thing. It depends. I'm going to keep it at that. But once again, I'm going to emphasize, if it's something that you're showing the world, make it presentable so that you don't get embarrassed to the world, right? It's very simple. You not having a Facebook account is not necessarily a bad thing. That just means you have more real friends than than pretend friends, right? So No, it's certainly not a negative thing. Don't look at it that way. But if and when you ever get a Facebook account, make sure whatever you post, or if you're going for a job, there are two ways of posting. One is private to just your friends. Nobody else will see it, even if you look for it. And then there's the public postings that you actually want the world to know you as, or know you by, right? So be careful about that. It's not just a posting. Be more respectful of what you're posting.
So to follow up on, oh, I'm sorry, did you have a question?
But it's not related to social media. Is that okay?
Okay, write it down and don't forget it.
Actually,
It's practice round.
So I'll make one last point, and then we'll come back to you if that's okay with you. Has anyone heard of the term your personal brand? Is that something you're familiar with? And it relates to social media in the context that, everything that you post, whether it be personally or professionally, kind of lends itself to who you are as a brand. So this wonderful thing we call the internet has brought us all closer together and made us this marketing piece, so to speak. When I think branding, I think marketing, and it's really how you want to put yourself out there in the job market. So if any of you have had the opportunity to work with a professional resume writer, they're very in tune with social media and making everything consistent. What's on your resume should also dictate what's on your LinkedIn profile. So it should be a one continuous kind of form of how you represent yourself, using various multimedia and print options. So you want to make sure you're consistent, you're professional. Who do you want to be? Define yourself. It kind of takes it to a next level where we used to just rely on a resume to realize who that person we were bringing in is. But now we could take it to a more multimedia platform and really understand better what you're interested in, what your affiliations are. So be consistent, be mindful of what you're posting, and make sure that it represents you and who you want to be in the job first.
Yeah, and if I can just add on to that, so just a couple of really tactical things about your personal online presence. So if you choose to have a picture on your LinkedIn account, personally, I prefer when people do, because again, kind of you can send a message about what that person might be about. Make sure you have a professional picture. I work in the hospitality industry. I can tell you some of the pictures I see, people look like they're being a little too hospitable in their LinkedIn picture. So as Shah had mentioned, I do the same thing. Whenever I'm interviewing somebody, I Google them, I look them up, you see what you can find, and sometimes you find things that are surprising. So make sure just the basics of if you have a photo, it's a presentable photo. Make sure that your profile is typo free. I read one recently where it said something, I don't remember the specifics, but it said, I think the person meant to say, I have saved the company millions of dollars, and they actually wrote, I have spent millions of dollars from the company. And if you're applying for a finance position, my CFO is probably not going to want to interview you. So sometimes it's those very basic things, and even your email address. I remember one time when I was working in the pharmaceutical industry, a lot of times people have a personal email address, and when you're conversing with them, you're using their personal address because they don't want to use their company address. And I just remember emailing this woman that was hotsexylegs@gmail.com. And she's interviewing for a scientist position. I'm thinking, wow, okay, that's usually not two things that go together. But again, it's a small thing, but it's these differences that sometimes, it's all in the eye of the receiver. You can get, folks like Shah, Michelle, and I, who we've kind of seen a lot, and we say, okay, we get it. But then you get somebody who looks at that and says, next, typos on the LinkedIn page. I see the hot, sexy legs, and that's great that you're a scientist, but probably not a fit for a conservative pharmaceutical company. So yes, it's about your brand, but part of the brand is that polish. And that polish is those things like your photo, the words that you choose, error-free in your spelling, grammatically correct. So when someone's reading it, they do get a sense of who you are.
Also use it to your advantage the other way around. Just like employers are looking you up, you can actually look up the person you're going to go walk into a closed room with as well. The interviewer's name should always be available to you before you walk into an interview. So as soon as you get that name, look him or her up on LinkedIn and find out about where they have worked in the past, how they have progressed in their career. I mean, obviously you're not going to look to judge them, whether you're going to hire them or not. You're going to look at for a whole different reason. you could care less what their pictures are like, but you want to know where they worked in the past. Why do you want to know that? Because that creates conversation topics for you, right? When you're asking questions or when you're talking to them, you can ask them, hey, how have you transitioned? Or if they've transitioned from a different company or different industry, you can create that as a conversation topic and say, like, how have you transitioned from your last industry or last company to here, and what differences did you find when you transitioned? What were the first 90 days? How was it like? Did you see any negative, positive differences? Those are conversation topics, right? Now, how would you know to get to that? By doing some research about the interviewer on social media, because they should have their LinkedIn profile. More than often, 95% you'll see they have their LinkedIn profile and their career progression on LinkedIn.
And also, I would just, to conclude or add to that, is be mindful of how you connect with people you're going to be interviewing with, and understand that it's not always appropriate to friend your interviewer on Facebook or connect with someone on LinkedIn. A little less understandable in LinkedIn. You're for business, so but still not always appropriate to connect before you get the job. I'm sometimes inundated with candidates who want to connect with LinkedIn before you've even been extended an interview. So understand that that could be a little awkward and not always appropriate. I think the timing of when you're connecting with someone is really important, and it shows good judgment. You know, you want to be perceived as not jumping the gun or being too entitled. I think Shad mentioned earlier. So kind of timing and how you use social media, so it's not almost creepy at times. I mean,
Stalker.
I say that not to be funny, or you want to research the person that you're interviewing with, but use what you've learned to your advantage and not to bring up things that may not be appropriate to discuss during an interview.
Great. I think that's a great way to end the discussion. We'd like to open up maybe one or two questions from the audience.
Yeah, I have two quick questions. On the Skype interview, should I be in a specific room? And how would how should I look? My hair, or you suggested the clothing should be appropriate, but my hair, how should my hair be? Tied back or just down? I don't know.
Michelle, Lisa, do you guys want to take it?
I would just recommend, if you were going to an in-person interview, how would you style yourself to do it the same way on Skype? That's just, again, in the spirit of being more conservative, err on the side of more conservative. If you are going in to meet somebody, you're probably going to put a little extra polish on in terms of how the hair looks and, picking your wardrobe. I would do the same thing for a Skype interview. It would not hurt you. If you go the other way and you're a little bit too informal, you don't know. Again, every interviewer just has different nuances that they sometimes will just get stuck on, right or wrong. So if there's something about your look that can be distracting, and I've heard this from hiring managers, love the candidate, thought the candidate could do the job, but we hear, the earrings were too big, they were clinking every time she moved her head. Someone said, reminded me of like Donna Summer Disco. Unfortunately, that's the type of stuff sometimes that can just rule somebody out, but they may be a great candidate. So I would recommend just dressing for the interview, whether it's an in-person or Skype.
And should I be in a specific room?
I would recommend that you have a room where there's no distractions in the background. If you've got a TV playing in the background, again, the interviewer might get distracted. Or if you've got a poster or something interesting, interviewers get distracted as well. You interview a lot of different candidates, and sometimes you're interviewing that candidate and you're like, oh my gosh, I got 45 more minutes. Okay, and your mind does start to wander. So you want the interviewer focused on you. So I would keep the background free from distraction. A place in your house or a quiet location. At a Starbucks is probably not the best place. You're going to get all this background information, people walking past. It's quiet. It should be about the conversation with you in the interview, just the same as if you were in the room. And I've actually seen this. We have an iPad in work, and we were interviewing candidates actually from the Netherlands one time. And the way the candidate was sitting, she was sitting in a room where the window, the shade was open behind her. and she looked like a black shadow because the sun was coming in. And I finally said to her, I said, I'm having a little bit of trouble. You can go ahead and pull the shade, maybe just put a light on. Because after a while, I was just talking to a black head. That's all I could see. And it was distracting. So you just find a nice way. Can you see me okay? Is the picture okay? I know when I do them from home, sometimes I have 3 cats, and my biggest issue is my one cat sits and meows at the door because I have her locked out. So I'll usually lock her in another room because, again, I don't want there to be any distraction to the candidate I'm interviewing saying, are you in pain? It's like, no, that's just Abby trying to get into the door. So free from distraction, it's the professional way, just as if you were sitting across, if I was sitting next to Shaw.
And one last question. If I'm desperately needing this job that I'm interviewing for, and it's in another state, how do I present myself not in that need? And, how do I present myself that, yeah, I do need this job, but, I'm not that desperate? How do I present myself?
You mean without verbally telling the person,
Exactly.
hey, I'm not desperate,
Or like
right?
in a Skype interview,
Yeah.
I don't want to be too needy.
So of everything that we mentioned, this is a very good question because I often get that. Everything that we mentioned throughout the entire panel, body language, confidence, eye contact, not staring, not glaring, good questions, letting the person talk, finish off, and then if you put all of those elements together, it's almost like a, I don't know if I'm aging myself, but Captain Planet, anyone? Captain Planet fan? No? So if you put all the rings together, you get Captain Planet, right? So if you put all those skills together, you're pretty much not gonna come off as if you're desperate. And try it. Try taping yourself, putting all those skill sets together and practicing one, adding one skill at a time and then putting the whole thing together. You will see that you will come off very confident, and you won't come off very desperate or in need of the job. But if you just follow these little steps, they seem like they're not much, but if you put them all together, they're very effective, trust me. And then soon you will see it's not just the job, but even after you get the job, you will still exude that respect because you're following these steps of communication, these formal ways of communication. So you will never come across desperate, even anywhere, whoever you speak to.
And one of the questions or the follow-up questions that I usually ask when I see that someone's applying who's not local or from a different state, and you can expect that they'll ask, well, why are you going to are you able to relocate, and why do you want to relocate? So how you answer that question can dictate. If you have your whole family in New Jersey and you're very tethered to your family, but the job is in Montana, if I hear you say, well, all my family's here and I'm going to miss them and it's going to be hard to move, I may think you're not really committed to moving. But if you say, hey, I just have friends that moved out there, that it's great, I know the industry is growing, I love the industry, I love the location, but with the sense of being authentic, right? Desperation aside, you don't want to ever show your hand to the interviewer that you are that desperate, but you want to, again, you're going to have to live with the consequences if you take a job in another state and you don't want to. So what's going to make you happy? Yes, getting a job is going to make you happy, but if you have to relocate to somewhere that you have to live and it's not going to make you happy, that's something to consider, as part of weighing your job offers.
Unfortunately, we do have to wrap up the event. We could talk about this forever. You guys have been
I just got
invaluable.
started. God.
Well, I'd like to thank Lisa, Shaw, and Michelle for taking the time to spend here with us. I'm sure if anybody has any questions, they'd be glad to answer after the event. I want to thank everybody for coming, especially all the ALI members that came. I want to thank Stella and John for helping us put this event together. If anybody's interested in joining ALI, just see one of us and we'll give you all the information. So, thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.